Okay, so now that we've got physical development out of the way, we're going to talk a little bit about cognitive development. The one individual that we're going to focus on with regards to cognitive development was the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. So Piaget believed that learning is an innate process, meaning that every human being is born with the biology, the biological imperative to learn. It's just like a mechanism that is universal for all human beings. So we talked before about nature nurture. So he believed that learning or acquiring knowledge is in our nature. It is something that we're all born with. He did discount nurture. Like he believed like, sure, it's important for your parents to interact with you and read to you and give you enriching toys and stuff like that. But he believed that left to our own devices, all of us would learn, and we are our own teachers. We are our own first teachers. And he believed that we learn in stages, and that each stage represents a qualitatively different capability than the last. So when we move from one stage to another, it's not just like we're acquiring more knowledge. It's not like we're accumulating more understanding and more content. We're actually a uniquely different learner. We're a uniquely different thinker. So the way that you think today in your late teens, early 20s, mid 30s, whatever, is the quality of how you learn at this age is entirely different than how you learned when you were 7. And the way that you learned when you were 7 is entirely different than the way that you learned when you were a newborn. So he believed that we learn in particular stages. He also believed that there were certain mechanisms that we had in our brain that were ways that allowed us to adapt to changes in our environment. So when we're talking about Piaget, there's some technical terms that he used when he had to understand or had to explain how we understand things. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint again here. So again, Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. Piaget's concepts of related to cognitive development. So at the heart of Piaget's concept of cognitive development is something that he called a schema. And a schema is a concept. It's a framework. It's a way that we organize information. So you can think of a schema as like a building block of knowledge, like a Lego of knowledge. So anytime we learn something new, we can form a schema related to that. So schemas are really based primarily off life experience and interacting with our environment. So when we're young, when we're babies, we don't have a lot of life experience. So we don't have a lot of schemas. And the schemas that we have when we're babies are really simple. So they're primarily what are related to our motor skills, our motor abilities. So at some point in my development, right, my mom used to nurse me. And then at some point, my mom switched me over to solid foods. And what most of us probably had as our first solid food was some form of kind of like an oatmeal or cereal, right? So we had to form a schema. Once we learned to feed ourselves as babies, we had to form a schema related to that complex task of feeding ourselves cereal or feeding ourselves, let's just go with like oatmeal, right? So like what you see here is like oatmeal on a spoon, right? And if I wanted to eat it, I would just take the spoon to my mouth and put it in my mouth. I don't even have to think about it, right? And I can do this mindlessly. I can be sitting here eating this oatmeal. Well, when we're babies, the first time you give a baby a spoon, the baby isn't going to know what the heck to do with it. So that baby has to go through really complex processes to learn how to get that spoon to his mouth to eat the food. Now, so I'll form a schema, as babies will form a schema related to this particular act. Now, if I go like this with the oatmeal, right? It's a heavy, sticky substance. So I can pretty much, if I'm a baby, this is a pretty like no-fail food on my spoon because I can do a lot with it and I don't have to be like really careful about it and I'll eventually get it to my mouth. So I don't have to really adjust what I'm doing to get this spoon in my mouth. But I don't have any yogurt, but let's say that this was yogurt, right? Once I form that schema about putting food on a spoon and getting it to my mouth, I get into a repetitive pattern of being able to do it. Let's say your mom just switches you over to yogurt now, right? So let's say I had yogurt on this spoon. If what I did in trying to eat that yogurt. So if I apply that schema to this new situation, and I took that yogurt and I turned it upside down, like I did with the oatmeal, what's going to happen? The yogurt's going to fall off the spoon, right? And I'm going to try as a baby, because I'm frustrated and I really want this food. I'm going to try as a baby to keep doing what I did before to get that same end result. At some point, I'm going to learn that if I'm eating yogurt, I need to switch things up a little bit. I can't take that spoon and play with it and turn it up and no. And I can't sit back here. Maybe if I've got a different type of food, if I've got yogurt on my spoon, I need to come close to my spoon and shorten the distance so I can get that yogurt into my mouth. So now I've formed a schema about how to eat yogurt, and I already had a schema about how I ate oatmeal. So as I said, when we're young, when we're babies, we don't have a lot of life experience. We don't have a lot of nuggets of information or Legos of information, building blocks of knowledge. As we grow, as we develop, as we learn, as we acquire more knowledge, we build ever increasingly hierarchical structures of these particular schemas. So there's a way, well, there's two ways really, that information, why is that both coming up? There's a way that we learn schemas. There's two different ways that we can deal with schemas. One's called assimilation, the other one's called accommodation. There's the two definitions for assimilation and accommodation. So let me give you an example. So let's say you've got a really neglected 3-year-old nephew. So his parents are super paranoid. They don't let him go outside. He doesn't have books. He doesn't have access to the internet. He doesn't have friends. He doesn't go on play dates. He has relatively little life experience, so he has relatively few schemas. But there's one thing that he does have a schema about. He has a pet dog, and his dog is a Harlequin Great Dane. So he does have a schema related to what a dog is, right? And in his mind, a dog is an animal that has white fur, black spots, 4 legs, a tail, and ears. So that's his schema. That's his concept. That's his framework about what a dog is. Okay. Hang on a second. Kaylee! She's playing something, Minecraft or something. World of Warcraft, I don't know. Shooting people, something, sorry. She was warned that I'm filming this and she is not listening. So, okay, so he's got a schema about what a dog is. She's probably gonna do it again at some point. He's got a schema about what a dog is. And you decide you feel really bad for your 3-year-old nephew, so you're going to take him down for a ride through the back roads of South Jersey, right? And you're driving along and you see this animal out in the field. And this animal has white fur, black spots, 4 legs, a tail, and ears. And your 3-year-old nephew points at that animal out in the field and goes, "Look, Uncle Mike, it's a dog," right? Why the heck does your poor neglected nephew call this animal a dog? Well, he's got a schema about what a dog is. And to him, a dog is an animal that has four legs, white spots, black spots, white fur, 4 legs, a tail, and ears, right? So he's got a schema about what a dog is. He knows that this animal here isn't exactly a dog. It doesn't look exactly like a dog, but it's close enough to what his schema of a dog is that he calls it a dog. So what he's doing there is he's assimilating. He's incorporating new information, and this is new information, into existing schemas. Now, depending on where he is in his level of cognitive development, he's going to do one of two things now. Let's say you say to him, "No, little Mikey," or "No, your name's Mike," "No, little Bobby, that's not a dog, that's a cow," right? When you present him with new information, he's going to do one of two things. He might continue to assimilate. He'll look at you and go "Wait, what? Okay, yeah, no, it's not, it's a dog." And he might continue to call it a dog for a long time. He might continue to assimilate. Or if he's ready to make a cognitive leap, what he might do is he might accommodate. Here's accommodation over here. And when we accommodate, we change our existing schemas to reflect new information, which basically means we form a new schema. So if he accommodates, he might form a new schema about what a cow is. So when you correct him and say, "That's not a dog, that's a cow," And if he were to accommodate, he would create a new schema. He would go, oh, okay. Well, maybe dogs are animals with 4 legs, white fur, black spots, a tail, and ears, but dogs live in Philadelphia and cows live in New Jersey. I don't know. He comes up with some 3-year-old logic to differentiate between the two. So when we assimilate, we're kind of comparing things to what we already know. When we accommodate, we're creating a new schema. Okay, that's how we form these schemas. As I said before, Piaget believed that we develop in 4 separate stages. First stage is called sensory motor. Begins at birth and it lasts until about the age of 2. The way that we learn during this stage of development is by coordinating our growing sensory abilities, so what we hear, feel, smell, taste, and touch, with our developing motor skills. So the major milestone that we accomplish during this stage is called object permanence. Object permanence is the ability to understand that objects continue to exist even when they are out of sight. So even when I can't see them. So I'll give you an example of object permanence. Let's say, hang on a sec. Okay. Oops. All right, technical difficulties here. I think we're still filming. All right, so let's say, I don't know, playing with a baby, right? And that baby's really interested in this pen. So let's say I get the baby's attention, show the baby a pen, and then take that pen and I put it under a blanket, but I put it somewhere close in the baby's reach. So if the baby wants to reach for it, it can. If that baby reaches for the pen that is hidden under that blanket, so if it tries to move that blanket out of the way to get to the pen, then that baby has mastered object permanence, because that baby knows that that object continues to exist, even though the baby can't see it. If, however, you put a blanket over that pen and that baby looks at you like, what the, like you just created like the most impressive magic trick ever, and the baby like doesn't try to move the blanket to get it, then that's probably a pretty good indication, especially if that baby's like 3 or 4 months, that baby hasn't mastered object permanence. Object permanence, the opposite of object permanence is out of sight, out of mind. If I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So if I don't have object permanence, if I can't see it, it's disappeared. It's one of the reasons that really young babies love peekaboo, because literally what you were doing with a baby who has not mastered object permanence and you're playing peekaboo with them is you are magically disappearing and reappearing. Because if you cover your face, they can't see you. You're gone. You reveal your face, you have just magically reappeared in front of them. Okay. Second stage of development is the pre-operational stage. Picks up where sensory motor left off. So about the age of 2 to 7. Obviously, there's a heck of a lot of difference in the cognitive abilities of a 2-year-old versus a 7-year-old, right? Like some 2-year-olds are like barely talking, but 7, you're like doing multiplication and division. All of these stages actually have sub-stages. So if you're crazy enough to take me for like child development or adolescent development, you'll learn that there are actually sub-stages. We'll keep it basic and simple in here. Just stick with the pre-operational stage. The major milestone that we develop in the pre-operational stage is the ability to communicate meaningful language, meaning not just babbling or words. Like babies have vocabularies and babies can talk. Most babies can talk by the age of 12 months, or at least say things like mama, dada, baba. But meaningful language is like, I can communicate basic thoughts and ideas and wants and needs. And usually I'll do it in like what we call holographic speech. So I'll say like, mama cup or dada milk or something like that. So most kids by the age of 2 are using like 2-word, not sentences, but phrases to communicate more complex needs. There's a lot of cognitive advances that we make during this stage, but there's one major and kind of classic drawback during this stage, and that's what Piaget referred to as the inability to conserve. And that is the ability to conserve, not what I've written down here, not that, but when we can conserve, when we have the ability to conserve, we're able to understand that superficial changes to an object don't change the overall quantity or quality of that object. Okay, what the heck does that mean, right? Well, we've got a little video here, and I'll show you the video that will demonstrate what that means.
Can you look at these 2 glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass.
I don't know if you can see that.
Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount? That one.
Oops, that might have been a technical difficulty. Hang on a sec. All right, let's try that again. Okay.
Do you think that they have the same amount of juice?
Oops.
Can you look at these 2
One more
glasses?
time.
Do you think that they have the same amount of juice? You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice, this glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount? That one has more. This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more? Because it's taller.
All right, so they started out with the same volume, right? She was able to establish that both glasses had the same volume of water or liquid. Take a small fat glass, poured it into a tall thin. Obviously the volume hasn't changed, it's still the same amount of liquid, but because she's still in the pre-operational stage, that trips her up, that confuses her. She thinks, well, it's taller means more, therefore there must be more liquid. Okay, here's another example.
Okay, you ready? Okay, does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're the same?
Okay, so far so good, right? She's using logic, she's using problem solving, counting both of them out, comparing. She's good. Here's where she gets let us
5, 5. Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same? This one has more. That one has more quarters? Yeah. Why does this row have more quarters? Because it's more far away. It's more far away? Yeah, it's more far away than it's bigger.
because it's bigger, right? So that superficial change of just spreading out the quarters threw her off. I'm not going to finish the rest. You can watch the rest of it when it's up in online for you. I'll try to go back, I think. man. Okay, I think I'm back. Okay, so pre-operational. Third is concrete operational. Concrete operations picks up where pre-operational left off, so it picks up about 7. So right about as we're entering into elementary school, getting to about the age of 12. So right before we hit puberty, we've now can conserve. We have the ability to conserve. You're not going to trick us by giving us something in a tall, thin glass of, and having us think it's something otherwise. We start to use really more complex logic, reasoning. By 7, we're in a formal education, right? So we're starting to do homework, have to sit through a classroom. And we're really good at when we're dealing with things that are concrete. We're really good when we're dealing with things that are very black and white. Kids at this stage are really good at what we call dichotomous thinking. So thinking in terms of things being black or white. They love categories. They love collecting things. This is when you start collecting, like, Pokemon cards and putting them into different groups. This is when kids start collecting baseball cards and I don't know, whatever the heck kids collect these days. But kids at this stage have a difficult time thinking abstractly. They're really great at black and white. They're not really good at looking at things like nuances and shades of gray. So if you were to pose a kid at this stage like an ethical question, like if you were to ask them if a police officer can ever be a bad guy, or if a robber can ever be a good guy, right? They're going to think really, really concretely and very rigidly and say, no, police officers are good. So all police officers are good. All robbers are bad, right? And I don't know if you can hear that, but hang on a second. Cal! And teenagers are just always bad. So if you were to pose a question to a kid in this stage and say, well, can you think of any situation where a robber might actually be a good guy, right? Like, what if a robber was stealing a loaf of bread to save his starving family? They would have a really hard time with that because to them, robbers are bad, right? So they have a hard time with nuances. They have a hard time thinking in context. We don't really gain that ability until the last stage. And the last stage is formal operations, start right around when we enter into puberty, and it lasts until throughout our adulthood. And the major milestone that we make in this stage is abstract thinking. So if you pose that same question to a 16-year-old, well, could a robber be a good guy and could a police officer be a bad guy? They'll at least understand that there are possibilities to that, right? That it doesn't not necessarily have to be as concrete as that. This is when, when we start to enter into formal operations, it's right around when most of us start learning like algebra. That's kind of a concept that's, 6-year-olds aren't learning algebra, right? It requires you to be able to think abstractly and solve for X. It's about the same time that we start questioning things like religion and politics, things that we used to as kids kind of take for granted as being these, established institutions. Once we reach the teenage years, we become vegan because we're morally opposed to the consumption of animal products. And so that is usually a more complex way of thinking. We begin to be able to hypothesize about things and generate different possibilities to the same to the same problem. So that's, I felt like that was a really abrupt ending, but I'm sure you're really happy about that. So that's it. That is Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. Next thing we're going to talk about in the next video is Erikson's psychosocial stages of development, and then we'll be done with this chapter. All right, guys, hang in there. See ya.